You know what that means. Time for Explain and Verify. The announcement of a record 87.3% matric pass rate for South Africa's 2024 National Senior Certificate Examinations has reignited criticism that minimum pass mark category is too low, such that the others in some corners have mockingly called the matriculants the 30%ers. Now, this has raised concerns about the adequacy of the current pass requirements. However, the Basic Education Department reiterated its stance that 30% is not a matric pass mark requirement. Today, we are explaining and verifying what is the minimum pass mark rate of matric and whether or not means accepted to a bachelor's degree at the university. So, Samgele Masego is here to help us understand exactly what's going on here. Samgele.
Well, Bongiwe, indeed, the matric class of 2024 has made the nation proud by achieving South Africa's record-setting matric pass rate of 87.3%. This is something the country has always been striving for since the dawn of democracy. However, naysayers are having none of it, accusing government of lowering the minimum matric pass mark. Let's listen to the Deputy Minister of Education, Regina Mutlaule, on what she had to say about this criticism, particularly coming from the likes of Bosa of Musi Maimane. Let's just listen to the Deputy Minister of Basic Education.
Spreading misleading information regarding the National Senior Certificate pass requirements. In a nutshell, all that needs to be said is that 30%, which people are singing and it became a nice song and some are even joining the song without understanding the notes, is not a pass mark in this country. And it has never been and it will never be. If any candidate gets an aggregate of 30% in all subjects written, that candidate will surely not proceed to the next grade.
Well, Bongiwe, that was the Deputy Minister of Basic Education, Regina Mutlaule, basically explaining this issue of 30%. I know Musi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa, has been very vociferous on this issue of this 30%, saying the pass mark must be raised. It is a debate that has been raging on social media platforms such as X. It's a debate that is currently being raged as we speak. Some people are even calling for him to display his own matric certificate on social media, which he did not. So it's a huge issue, particularly when you moved from that higher grade, standard grade, to this national senior certificate phase of where we are currently as a nation. It's a debate that is currently raging. Many people have hailed the former Minister of Basic Education, Endi Motshekga, for the sterling work that she has done within the Department of Basic Education. You look to Mr. Gada, the MEC of Education in the Eastern Cape Province, one of the most improved provinces within the country, knowing that he dared to say that the Eastern Cape can achieve 85%, looking at the deplorable socio-economic conditions that the children face in that province of the Eastern Cape. And that jump by the province of KwaZulu-Natal, starting from the days of Peking Konyeni, going to the days of Advocate Kwazim Shengwe as MEC of Education, going to Mbali Fraser, and ultimately now to Sipho Hlomuga, the work that has extensively been done there within that province, and the Free State province continuing with the sterling work that was laid by the late Tate Mahwe. They are the best performing province within the currently Free State taking number 1, and a regression by the province of Panya Gauteng going in at number 3. So that tells you that a bit of work is being done, but the debate of 30% is a raging. Bongiwe, let's just look at our first graphic, which explains the four scenarios that are there within the matric passes in this current system that we have as a nation. It is a bachelor pass. You do know that KwaZulu-Natal was one of the highest provinces with the highest bachelor passes within the country. Then you've got a diploma pass. Then you've got a higher certificate. Then you've got a national senior certificate. But the bachelor pass becomes a hot potato and a huge debate within the country on what qualifies one to get a bachelor pass, and that doesn't correspond with the entry requirement APS scores for universities, and then it becomes a diploma where you've got many people who get those diplomas, then they can go to your universities of technologies, your DUTs, your TUTs, your VUTs, your CPUTs, your CUTs. Then higher certificate is your vocational training. They usually go to your TVET colleges within the country, Bongiwa.
So Samgele, one then asks, right, where does this 30% debate come from and why do we have it?
Those who are arguing that the lowest pass mark is 30% often analyze and look at the aggregate of an NSC certificate at a minimum level. Bongiwe, let's look at our second graphic, which basically explains this particular point. For instance, the NSC pass requirements. You look at admission for a bachelor's to a bachelor's field of study. That would be normally your traditional universities. Must obtain at least 40% for your home language, which is compulsory. So if your home language is isiZulu, you must get at least 40% for your home language. Must obtain at least 50% for other subjects excluding life orientation. So life orientation, sometimes universities, is not counted in your APS scores. For instance, my brother was doing matric this year, was counting his APS score. He got a 7 for life orientation. But I told him that, my brother, you cannot count that 7 on your final APS score because universities don't count life orientation. Then you go to must obtain at least 30% for language of learning and teaching, LOLT. Then must obtain at least 30% for one other subject. Must pass at least 6 out of the 7 subjects. This is for a bachelor's degree that you can get for passing your matric certificate at this point in time. Does not guarantee you access to a university, a traditional university, your UCTs, your WITS universities, your UPs, your UKZNs, etc. Does not guarantee you that. Then we move to admission to a diploma field of study. Must obtain at least 40% for your home language, compulsory. Must obtain at least 40% for 3 other subjects excluding life orientation. Must obtain at least 30% for the language of learning and teaching, LOT, of the tertiary institution, higher education institution. Must pass at least 6 out of the 7 subjects. So very similar, but just changes here and there. Then you look at admission for higher certificate of field of study. Must obtain 40% for home language, compulsory. Must obtain at least 30% in the language of learning and teaching. Must obtain at least 40% for 2 other subjects. Must obtain at least 30% for 3 other subjects. Must pass 6 out of the 7 subjects. That is for a pass in a higher certificate. Does not give you access to a university of technology or to a traditional university. Then you move to national senior certificate. Must obtain at least 40% of your home language, compulsory. Must obtain at least 40% of 2 other subjects. Must obtain at least 30% for 3 other subjects and must pass 6 out of the 7 subjects. So those are essentially the requirements for one to get a bachelor's degree, a diploma pass or bachelor's pass in university, in matric, a diploma pass in matric, higher certificate pass in matric, and a national senior certificate in matric as well. So those are essentially what you have to get one of these particular passes at matric level.
Interesting, Samgele, especially when you look at this 30% versus 35 versus the 35% aggregate debate. But the minimum bachelor pass, which appears not to be accepted by universities, what makes that bachelor pass?
The minimum pass for bachelors appears not to be meeting most of the university entrance requirements for a bachelor study. Let's look at the examples that are currently there in our third slide that will look at the minimum pass for bachelors. Minimum pass for bachelors, isiZulu, for example, if you are doing home language in isiZulu home language must be 40%. That would be an APS score of 3. Then you go to English language of learning and teaching, that must be a 30% APS score of 2. Then you go to mathematical literacy, that must be 50%, APS score of 4. Physical science, APS score of 50%, APS score of 4. Then you go to life sciences, 50% gives you an APS score of 4. Geography, 30% APS score of 2. If you tally these particular numbers, Bongiwe, they give you a minimum APS of 19. Bongiwe, at this point in time. That is what you can get on your certificate for a bachelor's. but it differs. I looked at one student this morning who received scores that are relative to this, but his final APS score was 23. But on this matric certificate, it was written diploma pass, not a bachelor's pass. So it was a debate we were having at home. My wife was saying, no, in fact, the minimum is 23 APS, and that gives you a bachelor's. And I said, no, but my brother got 23, and it's written diploma. So that is a debate that is currently not yet clear. It's not yet clear for anyone, because someone then came in and said, no, 24 gives an APS score of 24, then gives you a bachelor's pass. But then there are discrepancies there, which our guest from the Department of Higher Education will try and clarify for us, Bongiwe, as we move on.
Yeah, I think bring him in, because I'm trying to understand exactly why would a 23 and a 24 look different, because you know, especially when you think about the fact that if at 23 others can then be able to get a bachelor and then at 24 others aren't, what's the difference there? Because one would expect a 24 is higher than a 23. They would then be getting you know, that bachelor pass. But also you look at the fact that isiZulu home language, others who are raising a concern to say at 40%, you should be asking for more. So it's quite interesting to see that picture, and I'm keen to hear what the expert has to say.
We will bring in the expert shortly, Bongiwe, especially when we finish this the fourth graphic now, which we are going to go to, which looks at the minimum pass for bachelors appears not to be meeting universities that we've just gone through. And this is the one, Bongiwe, this is the NSC one, Bongiwe, which looks at the National Senior Certificate, which basically says isiZulu home language, APS score of 3, English first language, APS score of 3 as well, 40%. Mathematical literacy, 40%, APS score of 3. Physical sciences, 30%, APS score of 2. Life sciences, 30%, APS score of 2. Geography, 30%, APS score of 2. All tallies up to APS of 15. Does not give you access to a University of Technology, does not give you access to a traditional university as well. But let's bring in Mr. Hendrik Manakineti from an education activist who will further clarify these particular points. He is a director for the Foundation of Education and Social Justice in Africa. A very good evening to you, sir. Just a brief explanation. When you look at the results that students are getting and the APS scoring, is this APS scoring and minimum marks meeting the NSC requirements, meeting university requirements? What is currently going on? There's confusion around the 30%. Can you give it and lay it down to our viewers and explain it in layman's terms?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Samkelo. There is no doubt that you know, there are minimum requirements for the NSC for somebody to pass the National Senior Certificate. And of course, in the beginning, you have correctly highlighted the different subjects. To start with, let me say that the minimum requirements for anyone to pass will be to get at least 40% or more in 3 subjects, one of which must be the home language, as we've already indicated when we started. And of course, they must get 30% or more in 3 other subjects. So it does not necessarily mean that it must be 30, but 30% is the minimum for those other 3. So technically, a learner can pass with 30% in most subjects, as long as 3 of those have a minimum of 40%. Now, this talks exactly to what the Deputy Minister of Education said when she said there is nothing like 30% pass. So 30% is there, but only for a few. So in this case, it will be technically 30% for most of the subjects that the learner did, plus 40% for 3. Now, for bachelor's pass requirement, the standards become higher there, because in this case, one will need at least 40% or more in 4 subjects, and you know, the remaining 3 will be 30%. But yeah, Samkelo, I must indicate that this confusion that is that we are talking about in terms of the APS score also relates to the type of subjects that learners have been doing in matric. You know that we have learners who take the stream of mathematics and science. There are those who also take mathematical literacy. other streams. Now, in terms of the bachelor's pass, a student or a learner may get a bachelor's pass in their certificate, but that too does not necessarily guarantee admission to some of the programs that are offered at university level. And I'll give an example. If somebody has to study engineering or medicine, for example, they may require a minimum of 60% in mathematics and science, between 60% and 80%. That's what may be required in most of our universities. And that is why, people will always say, but, I qualified to be at university. Why am I not admitted? So it is because of those, differences in terms of the APS score, as you have already said, because the subjects, learners are not doing the same subjects. Others have taken mathematics, others have taken mathematical literacy.
Is the Department of Basic Education on the right track, considering many positives that have come out of these results? Is the department on the right track, or are we not on the right track? Particularly looking at some of the worst schools that are there within the country, your Eastern Cape, your KwaZulu-Natals, your Limpopos, but you saw a huge growth in the pass rate of these particular provinces, particularly when you look at Eastern Cape, where the MEC said that he will achieve 85%. Under those deplorable conditions, he achieved that 85%. A vast province like KZN was very low over the years within the pass rate, today sitting as the second province within the country when it comes to best performance.
Well, Samukelo, there is no doubt that, since our matric, the focus is on matric. Remember, there are other grades as well, which we are not looking at. But there is no doubt that when it comes to matric, the provinces such as KZN, I was there 2 months ago, and I saw for myself the work that they've been putting during weekends as well. This country has come to a situation whereby if you drive in the streets of townships on a Saturday or even on a Sunday, you will come across learners carrying their books, wearing their uniforms, going to school, all coming from school. So I think that the provinces, all of them, have really worked very hard to ensure that they improve the performance of learners. What I see still a bit of a challenge is just the fact that Gauteng province, which is an urban province, continues to be at the top if you can look at the trend compared to provinces such as Limpopo, as well as the Eastern Cape, the rural provinces. And I think this can be attributed mainly to the skewed distribution of resources. You know that when even Panyaza was still the MEC, in Gauteng, we have seen a lot of smart boards being brought into classrooms. Gadgets were delivered. I don't know, as of now, it looks like, that particular program is no more there. But the resources, if you look at this rural provinces as well as urban provinces, are a bit different. But that does not mean that learners in the rural areas have not done well. There are many who continue to do well up to today. And I think this can be attributed to the management. Because if a province is led very well by the MEC for education, if they've got proper strategies to ensure that learners can improve, that certainly can assist. And I think that most of these provinces are doing that.
Thank you very much for your time. It is indeed a healthy competition that we've seen over the years of the MECs. I remember the competition, Bongiwe, between the late Tate Mahwe, Panyaza Lusufi. You'd see it at the Results Center as well. You'd see that healthy competition. You'd see it at the mid-make meetings where would be allowed access by the then Minister of Basic Education, Enzu Mutsecha. You bring in Kwazimu Shengu as well from KwaZulu-Natal. You'd also bring in, when you go to Polibushielo in Limpopo, when she was still the MEC of Education within that province. One wonders today, I saw the MECs lined up there looking at Matume Chulane of Gauteng, Panyaza Lusufi, David Mania of the Western Cape. Then you just ask yourself, what are they saying to one another when they seek to motivate one another? You look at a Sipho Hlomuga, a very coy individual, is not as joyful as Matume, as the MEC of Education within the Eastern Cape, who has been making significant strides, hitting the right notes, saying the right words, and the proof is in the pudding right now with the results that have just come out of that province of the Eastern Cape. One wonders if he can also be assisted by his premier in the form of Oscar Mabuyane, just like Panyaza Lesufi, so hands-on with education within his province of Gauteng.
All right, Samkele, as you say, let's see what happens next, in fact, this year and into next year as well, to see if these MECs will get, some of their desired outcomes. But certainly, we do hope now you have a better understanding. And it's worth noting that matriculants have worked very hard and deserve to be commended for their great effort. It's clear that matric results give 4 different pathways that lead to different post-matric pursuit. Now the focus will shift to universities and their acceptance of new applicants as well as NSFAS funding.